to my channel. My name is Kristen. Welcome if this is your first time stopping by. I wanted to do a January wrap-up. Now, last year I didn't do a lot of wrap-ups just because, like, honestly, just the year went so fast and I didn't know if people really were interested in what I was reading. So this year I want to do it not just for you guys to know what I'm reading, what I'm enjoying, what are my ratings, but also to kind of track my own reading and what I liked for each month. So today is going to be our January wrap-up. This month I only read 5 books, 2 of them in audio format, but I own physical copies of, and then 3 physical books. And I did rate all of my books on Goodreads, so if you don't follow me, my link for my Goodreads is down below. So if you follow me there, that's where you'll see what I rated things first. And then when you come here, you can see a little bit more of an in-depth review if you are interested. So before we get started, if you are not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button down below. Welcome if you are new and recently subscribed. I've been seeing quite an influx of subscribers, so hi, how are you guys? And let's get into this video. So I thought I would share my books in the order that I read them throughout the year. So I'm going to just make sure I have the right order here. The first book I read in January, and I actually think I started the audiobook back in December, but I finished it in January, is Lovelight Farms by B.K. Boris. Now the 4th book in this series is coming out soon, but this is the first one, and I've had this on my TBR for a long time. And I don't know why I was putting it off, but I did want to read it around winter Christmas time. This does take place right before Christmas. I love the covers of these. I still have like sticky residue from the stupid Target sticker, but it is what it is. But I love the covers of these, and that's what initially drew me to them. And a lot of people were giving this incredibly high ratings. So if you're unfamiliar, I'm going to read you the synopsis of what the book is. So it says, in the beginning, 2 best friends fake date to reach their holiday happily ever after in this first romantic comedy in the Lovelight series. A pasture of dead trees, a hostile takeover of the Santa barn by a family of raccoons, and shipments that have mysteriously gone missing. Lovelight Farms is not the magical winter wonderland of Stella Bloom's dreams. In an effort to save the Christmas tree farm she's loved since she was a kid, Stella enters a contest with Instagram famous influencer Evelyn St. James. With the added publicity and the $100,000 cash prize, Stella might just be able to save the farm from its financial woes. There's just one problem. To make the farm seem like a romantic destination for the holidays, she lied on her application and said she owns Lovelight Farms with her boyfriend, only there is no boyfriend. Enter best friend Luca Peters. He just stopped by for some hot chocolate and somehow got a farm and a serious girlfriend in the process, but fake dating his best friend might be the best Christmas present he's ever received. So I did listen to this via audiobook, and I don't know if that played a factor into my rating. So I rated this book 3.5, and the reason is the plot of the story starts out with you finding out that Stella has applied for this, I guess you could consider it a contest, to have like the most Christmassy like tree farm or like magical place around Christmas. And she says that she entered the contest with her co-owner of the farm, which is her boyfriend. Granted, she works there by herself, or not by herself, she owns it by herself with the help of her 2 closest friends. And they have a really great dynamic, and she's all happy, but they just aren't making a lot of money. And there's also some mysterious things happening on her farm where her farm is kind of being sabotaged and she doesn't know why. Her best friend Luca steps in to pretend to be the fake boyfriend, but he obviously has some feelings for her pretty early on, and she reciprocates those same feelings as well. And the majority of the story follows like several weeks before the actual contest, and the influencer shows up to the farm. So the influencer shows up to the farm in like the maybe last 25%, where that's like where the contest is happening, but everything else is just like them fake dating, but like not fake dating in front of the influencer. So I wouldn't even really consider it like that they start fake dating for that, because they start fake dating like back in like before Thanksgiving, and the influencer shows up like the week before Christmas. So it just doesn't really line up. So with that, I gave it 3.5, but the writing was really good. The romance was really cute. I would say it's a good book. I would recommend it. It just wasn't hitting the mark with what I was expecting out of the book. The next book I read in January is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, And if you are new to my channel, you will not know, but if you have been around, you should know that I read some fantasy, but I am not a fantasy reader. I'm much heavily more of like a romance reader or a thriller or a cozy mystery reader. So fantasy sometimes it's kind of hard for me to digest. With Emily Wilde, this is taking place back in, I think, like the 1800s or early 1900s. It's supposed to be further back, and there's fantastical elements. I would rate this as like kind of like a cozy fantasy where there's fantastical elements, but there's also like realism. So I would almost say it's magical realism more than fantasy. But the story follows Emily, who travels to, I can't remember what the country is, but she travels to this country as she's working on an encyclopedia of fairy lore, and she goes there to get certain descriptions and learn about the fairies of that specific region. And she is very much on her own, she likes to be very separated. I kind of feel like she has some kind of inability to like describe her feelings well, but she just kind of gets off on the wrong foot with the townsfolk. So then this professor that works at her same university, who you can tell genuinely cares about her, shows up and starts to join her on this journey. And there's just a lot of like whimsy, and you learn about these fairies and like how to enter into the fairy portal realm and like how they interact with the townsfolk. It's a very interesting, and it's a very easy read, a very cozy read, if you will, and I really enjoyed it. There is a hint of romance that really comes to play more further on in the book, but it's really, really cute. I really enjoyed this. I believe I rated this 4.25 stars or 4 stars. So on Goodreads I put 4, and on Storygraph I put 4.25. So I really did enjoy this book. I already got the second one. I haven't read it yet, but this one is definitely one that I would recommend to a lot of readers, whether you like cozy books, whether you like a little bit of romance, whether you like fantasy. It's really, really well written, and I really enjoyed it. It also does have footnotes at the bottom of certain pages, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it because it kind of gives you a little bit of extra learning in there, so it was really, really good. Okay, the next book I read was Hooked by Emily McIntire. So this has been on my TBR for a long time. This blew up on TikTok and Instagram when the series started to come out. I believe from like being first independently published to traditionally published. And this book was so much more than I was expecting. It is such an easy read. It is very dark. There are a lot of dark romantic elements to this book. But if you're unfamiliar, this series is the Never After series, and it follows villains and their stories in like modern day. Not retold, but it's not a retelling, but it's like inspired by the classic fairy tales. So Hooked revolves around James, who is Captain Hook, or his nickname is Hooked, but he is a drug lord in some ways, or he works for a drug lord, and he has had a really rough past growing up. He lost his family, and he kind of became orphaned, and then was taken under this man's wing to grow up and learn to become who he is. And he is seeking revenge against the person who killed his family and ruined his life, which happens to be Peter Michaels. So Peter is based off of Peter Pan. They call him Pan, and obviously Peter has a daughter named Wendy, and in order to get to Peter, Hooked finds and seeks out Wendy to manipulate her and manipulate Peter into getting his revenge. And it was very, very good. It was very dark, has a lot of like, and it was pretty, not like graphic to the point where it's like disgusting, but it definitely shared details that were very dark. But overall, this was an amazing read. It was really well written, and I cannot wait to read more in this series. Oh wait, sorry, I didn't rate this. I rated this 4.5 stars. So the next book I read on audio was Love Lists and Fancy Ships, and this has been on a book list that I wanted to read before I turned 30 because this follows a girl. Her name is Jo, and Jo has a bucket list, or a list of 30 things that she wants to do before she turns 30, and she comes across this tragedy in her life that affects multiple aspects of her life and her family's life, and it's kind of a story of grief and grieving through her nieces who come to stay with her for the summer, and they go on all these adventures and they're grieving together, but they're also living life and enjoying the moment, and it teaches you so much about like living your life to the fullest. And of course there's a romance in there, but it is such a beautiful story. I absolutely fell in love with this book. I could not stop thinking about it, and it really resonates with me. So this actually got a 5-star for me. This one is so incredibly good. I loved it so much, and I'm so glad that I actually picked it up and read it. The last book I read in January is The Simple Wild, and this is a book that I've had for a little over a year, and I wanted to read during winter because it takes place in Alaska. It takes place in the Alaskan wilderness, where it's just this like, I think it's supposed to be, is it winter or summer? I think it's summer, where it's light all of the time, but there's still like these cold temperatures and this like smog, and just like, it's just so, I just like picture it being so gray and such a lack of sun, the way that everything is described. But just this cover itself, everything about this description of this book really made me want to read it in winter. And I'm so glad I finally picked this book up. This book is beautiful and hard to read, but also incredibly warm and just makes you appreciate so much. So I'm going to read to you what this book is about in case you are unfamiliar. Calla Fletcher wasn't even 2 when her mother took her and fled Alaska, unable to handle the isolation of the extreme rural lifestyle, leaving behind Calla's father, Ren Fletcher, in the process. Calla never looked back, and at 26, a busy life in Toronto is all she knows. But when Calla learns that Ren's days may be numbered, she knows that it's time to make the long trip back to the remote frontier town of her birth to attempt to fix their estranged relationships. She braves the roaming wildlife, the odd daylight hours, the exorbitant prices, and even the occasional "dear God" outhouse, all for the chance to connect with her father, a man who, despite his many faults, she can't help but care for. While she struggles to adjust to this rugged new environment, Jonah, the unkempt, obnoxious Alaskan pilot who helps keep her father's charter plane company operational, can't imagine calling anywhere else home, and he's clearly waiting with one hand on the throttle to fly this city girl back to where she belongs, convinced that she's too pampered to handle the wild. Jonah is probably right, but Calla is determined to prove him wrong. As time passes, she unexpectedly finds herself forming a bond with the burly pilot. As his undercurrent of disapproval dwindles, it's replaced by friendship, or perhaps something deeper, but Calla is not in Alaska to stay, and Jonah will never leave. It would be foolish of her to kindle a romance to take the same paths her parents tried and failed at years ago. It's a simple truth that turns out to be not so simple after all. So this story really is following Calla as she goes back to visit her father, who has cancer. He has lung cancer, and she finds out via some random woman who emails her and says, you really should come and visit your dad. He's not doing well, and he's too proud to ask for you to come visit him. So she actually picks up her life and goes there, and she gets to meet this father that she hasn't seen since she was 2. And you watch her form this relationship with her father, who she's barely known, and really learn about him and understand kind of who he is and why he is the way he is. And in the meantime, she's obviously meeting another pilot, kind of mimicking the same storyline that her mom and her dad followed, where she's falling in love with a pilot who will not leave Alaska because that's where he feels he belongs, just like she does not feel like she belongs in the wilderness of Alaska. The story has very sad parts, but it's beautiful and it's stunning, and the descriptions and the culture that you get to learn about and get exposed to really makes this a worthwhile read to me. So this book did get 5 stars, I believe. Yeah, so I did rate this book 5 stars, and I do really think it is worth the read. This is a series. This is not a standalone. So this is the first in the series, and I cannot wait to read the rest, but this was so, so good, and I highly recommend it if you are interested in reading a book kind of like this. So these are the 5 books that I read in January. I hope that this little wrap up was good for you guys. If you enjoy this, please let me know. I love watching reviews and wrap ups of like books of what other people have read, but I'm never gonna be somebody who comes on here and be like, I read 18 books this month. So these are only the 5 that I read, and I really enjoyed each and every single one of them, and really reading them and enjoying the experience of reading. And I'm trying to not put so much like pressure on myself to read a ton, because realistically that's just not what I do. It's not my lifestyle. But I do love reading, and when I'm in the mood, I will pick the book up and read, and I think I did really good with these choices this month. I appreciate you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you stick around, I will see you in my next one. Bye!